Welcome back to Abundant Culture Podcast,
where we dissect the mindsets and tactics of the true beasts of business.
People like Gary Vee, Grant Cardone, and Warren Buffett.
All to create a blueprint to experience life more abundantly.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to your favorite podcast once again. This week's guest is actually not an entrepreneur, but we like to call him entrepreneurial. And what he does is he takes these companies and these individuals and he makes them the best that they can be. And in this episode specifically, we're talking about company cultures. So just imagine what we're talking about in this episode. It was like so great, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear what he has to say about building and maintaining good company cultures, how to be great leaders, and so much more. So give it up for Jonathan Eisler. So hi, Jonathan, and thank you again for coming onto the podcast, especially with you being in a little bit of pain with your back right now. So we super duper appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure our audience appreciates that as well. So for this week, we are really excited to talk about psychology and culture in the workplace. But before we dive into all of that, can you give us a little bit of your backstory? Like, how did you get into psychology, and how did you get with this company?
Yeah, and first off, I want to thank both of you for the opportunity to participate in these conversations. I've been following your guys' channel and always get not only entertainment, but also some good nuggets of takeaway that I can actually then take back and apply to my professional life. I've even found some good stuff in my personal life too. So it's an honor to be a part of Abundant Culture. So thank you.
I'm glad we can help.
So backstory, and how did I get here? And I'm glad you mentioned the psychology piece though too, Jasmine. So I'll go back to, my mother tells a story. I was 4 years old and living in Alabama. I was born in Alabama. And we were at a little local park, right? And my mom was sitting there reading a book as I'm playing kickball with some kids. And she said that there was another little boy that was sitting on the end of the bench by her, and he was just sitting there by himself. I guess they didn't have smartphones back then, so we had nothing to do. And so my mom calls me over and she's like, "Hey, Jonathan, this guy is sitting here by himself and he doesn't have any friends to play with." So she said, I walked over to him and I said, "Hey, what's your name?" Obviously, I don't remember. I'll call him Timmy for the story. And I was like, "Hi, Timmy, my name's Jonathan." And my mom said, I then turned around. I looked across the playground. I see my friends playing kickball over here. And I see another little kid that's throwing a ball and he's bouncing it and he's catching it, right? Just kind of playing by himself over there. Mom says, I then walked over to him and I said, "Hi, my name's Jonathan. What's your name?" He's like, "We'll call him Billy," right? "My name's Billy." I said, "Billy, I got a friend you need to meet." I brought him over. I said, "Hey, Billy, this is my friend." What did I say his name was? We'll call him Tommy.
Timmy.
Right?
Yeah, Timmy.
"Billy, this is Timmy. Timmy, this is Billy. You guys should play catch." They hopped up, ran off, and I went back to my game of kickball.
Wow.
It was at that moment that she realized that I have a passion, maybe a knack, but more of a passion for connecting people with others and helping people to be happier, just happier in general. I'll say happy in general, right? So then we fast forward in high school, and junior year of high school, I became type 1 diabetic. And when I was in the hospital, they said, "Hey, would you be interested in talking to a psychologist to kind of help you get through this transition in life?" Admittedly, I don't know if I had ever heard the word psychology at that point in my life at 17. And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll talk to someone." And I quickly realized, I'll never forget him to this day, Steve French. I quickly realized that I had that passion for helping people get from point A to point B, like he was doing in the therapy with me. And I also realized that I had been doing that. I was like, oh, so this is what I've been doing with my friends. I went to a boarding high school, and I became the person that the dean would call in the dorm and say, "Hey, Jonathan, can you go talk to such and such? They're going through some issues right now at home, or their parents are getting split up, or his girlfriend just broke up with them." So I was already doing that stuff. And I said, wait a second, I can make money out of this. This sounds like a great career, right? It's about that alignment of personal and professional life. So I started studying clinical psychology, thought I wanted to be a clinician, did an internship during undergrad, and realized that while I love the psychology piece of the clinical piece of helping people through transitions or helping them overcome or to move forward, I also realized that my personality type wouldn't be a good fit. I would do such a huge disservice to any clients because I'm like, what do we do now to make tomorrow different, right? I didn't have a lot of patience for the process.
Yeah.
So I realized that maybe clinical counseling wasn't where I should be. So I took some time off, or I didn't go directly to grad school or after undergrad because I wanted to make sure that I knew what I wanted to do exactly. Started a job doing sales, and I quickly found that, yeah, the sales part was fun, being out in the field, but I had a lot of fun at the end of the day, talking to people, what worked. I mean, and this was like pounding the pavement sales, right? Knock on 80 doors, businesses, you're going to get 2 sales type of thing.
Yeah.
But it was also interviewing. It was training new people. And I realized that was what I really liked. So like at the end of the day, I would talk to people what worked, what didn't work, what campaign are you on? Then the next morning in our kickoff meetings every day, I would like share these stories. So the owner of the company said, hey, maybe you should be in team development role. And so he put me in charge of, or not in charge of, but I was a part of the team that was doing the interviewing, that was meeting with the different campaign leads, figuring out who they needed on their team, who would be a good fit, and then also helping to coach them up. So then I went back to my mentor in undergrad and I said, so here's what I'm doing right now. How does this relate to psychology? And he said, industrial organizational psychology. I hadn't even heard of it at that point.
Yeah.
So I started investigating and I said, wait a second, if I can work with organizational leadership and helping them create the types of cultures, the type of environments that brings out the best in people and is able to coach up and develop people, it's that same passion that I had for the clinical psychology at first, but on a grander scale. And it fit with my, what do we do now to make tomorrow different?
Yeah.
So that's sort of what brought me up into this field. And I was doing management coaching and management training for a little while. I got recruited out by a small firm while I was still in grad school. Then I wanted to understand more about the business side too. I was like, we're helping companies focus on the people side, but I want to also understand the business side, the environment that the people are working in.
Yeah.
I went back to business school at night while I was still working for that company and got the MBA. And so the IO psychology, the people side of business, with the MBA being the number side more so of business, made a perfect fit. And then that also led up to, I think part of your question was what led me up to where I'm at now today. At Perspectives, I had met the owner a few years ago, a few years back then, volunteering with the committee with the Chamber of Commerce. And Perspectives was looking to further grow our consulting division. So because I had background doing the consulting and I was wrapping up business school, it just made sense.
Yeah.
So I won't get too far down that rabbit hole. I think we'll get there throughout today's conversation. But it just made the perfect blend of me being able to combine both of my passions on helping people at the grander scale of helping organizations.
That's awesome.
That is.
Yeah.
And I really like how, mid-story, you said that the clinical psychology wasn't for you and that you chose not to do that because it would be a disservice to others. And I just thought that was that's awesome. People are selfish a lot of times. So for you to, take that moment, I'm not going to be able to help somebody, let me do something else. I thought that was great.
It also could be a little bit, thank you. Also a little bit of selfishness though too, because I realized I would be getting frustrated as hell. So I wouldn't have been happy either.
Yeah. But I think a big piece of really growing in whatever career field you're in, and this is a valuable lesson for anybody who's, really, really young and trying to still grow their career, is that self-awareness piece. And I feel like a lot of times in society, we miss that because we're listening to our parents, we're listening to our grandparents, our siblings, our friends, and all of these different people, teachers and whatnot. And where we know all of their opinions. And then at some point in time, you have to get to a certain point in your life where you're like, okay, who am I? And what do I want? What actually fits me? And I like how you let your self-awareness actually guide you through your process of not only picking a career, but growing that career as well. And I think that's super important.
Yeah.
So underrated.
It is. It's we're really talking about that alignment of personal and professional self, right? So you can bring your full self into the work that we get to do every day. And I think it goes both ways too, right? If you're unhappy at work, you're probably going to be unhappy at home too,
Yeah.
right? The more in an alignment that we can get these, the better. I speak periodically to some of the colleges and grad schools around here about this very thing with the students, about finding out what your passion is. It's like the question, what would you do if you won the lottery, right?
Yeah.
Or what would you do if you weren't worried about the money? And then that you can start to kind of build around what is a career, what is a role that actually gets there, right? So I go through a cool little process, but I think it's really important. I will say in one of the sessions, one person said, the only thing I care about is making a lot of money. Because they kept saying, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. But they were saying like roles or titles. They weren't talking about what the why is behind it. I said, okay, so when I asked them, I said, it's money. I just want to make money. I said, so why? What does the money do, right? And then they're able to walk down. They said, well, it enables me to be able to travel and do some other greater freedom. So to me, it's less about what the quality of the work is, but what that enables.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like an outlier, but I still pushed back a little bit, though. I said, that may not be sustainable.
Yeah.
Right? You all know what happens. By the time you're 10, 12 years in, you're like, oh, wait, I forgot to take a vacation. I'm still trying to get that. So I think it's really important to be able to align all aspects of our life.
Yeah. Like one thing I've realized is nobody likes a miserable millionaire. So it's like the money isn't, and I actually listened to this other podcast, and there's this guy who he was in banking, made a crap load of money, and he was absolutely miserable, just, using drugs and whatnot. But, and that happens and that came down to a lack of self-awareness. So I'm glad that you actually walk people through that. Can you talk about how important culture is in today's workplace and how that may vary a little bit from about 30 or 40 years ago? Or do you think it varies at all?
I think culture is more important than ever. It really is for tons of reasons. One is like the war for talent, right? We're at a record low unemployment right now.
Yeah.
You sort of even hinted at the generational differences in the workforce. It's even more so now. We can talk about how it's different maybe for millennials and Gen Z coming out. But it's so important. And also even just we think about the the overall connectedness of society anymore. Brand, right? Brand is so important. And I believe that culture directly ties to brand because the customer or client experience that anybody has in an organization is directly an outcome of the experience employees have at work.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, somebody walks out of your restaurant, your bar, your retail boutique, whatever it may be, they have a bad experience. The whole world knows about it in 7 seconds, right? Because they're blasting it out there. So then you say, okay, so why did they have a bad experience? 90% of the time, I'm going to say it's directly correlated to their experience with whoever they dealt with, the bartender, the server, the retail rep, the cashier, right?
Yeah.
So it is so important. I don't think companies can afford not to focus on culture.
Yeah.
Ones that don't probably aren't going to be around in a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to your question about 40 years ago, though, I think it was less important about that, right? It was more of a transactional society. Now, it was still important, but as it relates to retaining talent, I mean, our parents were lifers, right? You got the job, you hope to get a Rolex watch and get a little party thrown after 40 years when you leave.
Yeah.
Not that way anymore.
Yeah. And do you have any idea of why that might be? I always kind of wonder, and I'm a millennial myself, but I still wonder to this day. I'm always like, why are we so different in just this small generational gap? It's like, even comparing me and my parents, it's like
a complete 180.
Yeah, it's like I don't even like what? Like we talk to each other sometimes, and it's just like the community. It's almost like a language barrier, even though we speak the same language. It's just it's like the values aren't the same, especially when it comes to work. And I always kind of wondered, like, why is that? And I felt like one part of it could be technology, but I didn't know if that was the whole story. And I just wanted to get somebody else's input on what that might be.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to preface my answer that I cringe when I hear generational titles be given, right? Because it starts to label and put people or groups of people in a box.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we do tons and tons of workshops around educating organizations about some of the differences between generations, because I know that there is value. I guess value may be the right word, but doing some broad brush strokes of assigning characteristics and attributes to a certain cohort, right?
Yeah.
Of certain years. So I get that, but I always just say, let's be cautious with labels.
Yeah.
But so then to your point, Jasmine, you said the 180, and that's really interesting, because what we find, what research shows, is that there's a generation gap, a skip, I should say. So Joe, you're talking about how you and your parents are completely different, right? What we usually see happen is that one generation, so your parents responded to what they saw in their parents, and then they will usually either evolve that or almost do the opposite. So then you come out as a result of that, right? And so now you and your parents are going to be very different. And then now when you have kids, your kids would be more likely to be like your parents than they are like you, because there's always this pendulum that kind of goes back and forth.
Wow.
So that's from like the nurture aspect of it, right? So it's the parenting environment, but it's also the societal things that we see. What types of events happened, right? So this new generation, Generation Z, they're the ones that were born with smartphones and technology in their hand.
Yeah.
Picked it up really quick, but they're still not near as adept there. But now let's talk about as it relates to company cultures. So millennials, broad brush here, alignment with an organization's values and culture and mission, all of that stuff is so important, right? We have a niece that she actually turned down a job that would have netted her. She had a couple job offers after she graduated from Penn State a few years ago. And she turned down a job for $10,000 less because she felt more alignment with this other company's culture, as evidenced by their social media presence, by their YouTube, things like that. And she's like, I can get excited about going to work for this company because they're more in alignment with me. Right?
Wow.
Now what we're starting to see, though, with this new generation, they saw their parents and even their older siblings, maybe the millennials, go through this recession of 2008 that started, that pullback.
Yeah.
Now they're more concerned about security. They're more concerned about financial security, job security, all of these other things. So we're starting to see a shift, and it's still super early, right? Because this generation's maybe 19, so they're just now getting into the workforce, the oldest ones.
Yeah.
But they're not wanting to buy houses because that's a big commitment. That's a 30-year commitment. They will jump a job for another couple $1,000s in a year, right? Because they saw their siblings have to come back and move in with their parents. They saw their older siblings that may have graduated college and grad school not find a job and start working for minimum wage, right? So the whole thing's continuing to shift. And so I think the best that we can do as companies is just pay attention to who we have working for us, understand, sure, maybe some of the generational nuances, but also the individual nuances are so much more important. And then make sure that our culture, our benefits, all of this stuff are relevant and pertinent for the people that we have working for us or the people that we want to work for us, because then it gets back to the attracting talent.
Yeah. That's amazing, because I've never heard it explained that way. And as you were talking about it, I was like, in my mind, I was able to think of certain people in my family like, oh, that's why she probably thinks that way. Especially her little sister. I think of her little sister as kind of being like my little sister as well, because she's kind of cool in different ways in her own little weird way. But like, we don't necessarily think the same. And I remember I thought back to a conversation that we had, and, you know, me and Jasmine were all about entrepreneurship, and we were trying to tell her, like, you know, keep the job or whatever you're doing, but you might want to kind of, you know, explore this other thing called entrepreneurship. And she's like, and she's only 19, and she's like,
absolutely not.
I don't think so.
Right? Yeah, it's about that security. I mean, we know entrepreneurship, security is not even on that the list of values or
Right.
benefits from it. Right?
It's just totally out the window. It's not even. It's not even a concern. I hear security and I'd be like, "What? What is that?"
Right.
I mean, it's a fun exercise to kind of step back and look. So, like Gen Xers that were born boomers that were born 46 to 67 or 46 to 64. I think, I mean, the numbers vary, whatever you want to call that, right? Then you think about what happened there and their parents coming back from war, from World War II and whatnot, and how their parents must have then been taking care of them, right? And then you look at, okay, so then the generation born 64 to 80, what was going on there? How could that influence? We could spend a whole nother conversation talking about the details, but it's a good exercise to step back and look at what was going on in society as well.
Yeah. And that makes everything a lot more understandable. And I think that's what a lot of this, culture really comes down to, is just understanding who you're working with or who you're working for, or, who you just hired. And I feel like in our society, it's kind of weird. We have pretty much all the knowledge in the world and at the palm of our hands, but we misunderstand each other so much. And it's kind of weird to like just be able to, go out and kind of read these certain studies, but like not doing that because it's not something that you're really paying attention to. So it kind of just goes on a back burner, and then you just end up saying to yourself like, oh, that person is just weird. Like, why do they do that? Why do they think like that? But when you put it into context, it's like, oh, I guess I would have made the same assumption if I were in this, the same situation they were in society. So that really makes sense. Did you have a question before? Another question. Oh,
well,
go ahead.
Real quick, I want to kind of build on that too. It's the same thing when we're doing, whether it's workshop development, whether we're mediating conflict between employees, in my day job here, or we're training groups on how to work together more cohesively. It is all about understanding one's own differences and others' differences. So we say it's personality, not personal.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a big difference. So some people, they're fast paced and they're results focused, right? So they don't have time for the little small talk and little nuances. They're like, tell me what it means and what's next and let's move on, right? And then someone else may say, well, I want to understand, was everything thought through? Does A lead to B? Does B lead to C? And so those two people can have a huge conflict, right? Yeah. One comes up to the other and they're like, so then they start to think, oh, we just don't get along, right? So, oh, she just doesn't like me. But then we start to step back and say, it's not really that. There's personal differences. Now with that understanding, how do you then understand that someone else is going to be different than two, and how can you adapt and learn? And I think the same thing applies to generational as it applies to working cohesively as a team. Heck, as it relates to partners, right?
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of differences that I know even me and Jasmine have. And it took us a while to really understand each other's, roles, especially in our company. But when we started to really understand them, it was almost like magic. Like, she would be like chilling and then I would be doing work, and then, I'll be chilling and then she does work. And it's almost like we hardly ever actually work at the same time, but it's like so much gets done. Like there's so many things in my business that I could honestly say, oh, well, I didn't do that. Like I knew it was being done. I knew it was going to get done at some point, but she did that. And it's almost like this rhythm that you can get because we're so different. And I think people who have differences, it can be hard in the beginning, but once you really understand those differences and start to capitalize on that, it can be extremely powerful. Because I look at other people who kind of do the whole solo entrepreneurship thing, and I'm like, I'll be praying for you, because I was like, I get free labor over here sometimes.
Yeah, and it'd be the same thing, right? If you both were the same people, it'd be there could be gaps, right? If you're doubling up on the same skills and stuff, and it's good to have some of that overlap too. But it's kudos to you both for understanding the differences and where you can really complement each other, right? I think the term compensatory, it's more compensatory relationship, but you have to have that understanding first.
For sure.
Yeah. My poor wife, quick story. So in the work that we do in our consulting group is a lot of assessments, right? So I was talking about helping people understanding themselves and understanding others. So there's an assessment that looks at behavioral and communication styles of individuals. It's the DISC. You may have heard of the DISC.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
From your listeners out there too. And there's a section in there that says ways to communicate with, and it's like a bunch of different bullets, right? And then ways not to communicate with Jonathan, let's say.
Mhm.
So my poor wife, after being together for 12 years, married 8, almost 9 of them, I ended up having her take a bunch of assessments too. So for an anniversary, it was Christmas one year, I had these shirts made that say, I took from mine, and I took like the top 5 ways that I want to be communicated with, and the number 1 I don't want to be communicated with. I took it off of my assessment and I put them on a shirt. It says ways to communicate with Jonathan, and it's check boxes. Ways to, and at the bottom is ways not to, or 1 way not to. And then I had the same thing made for her, and it says ways to communicate with Natalie. And I picked the ones off of her assessment. So after the entire family ridiculed me when she opened up the package, everyone started laughing. But now we wear them periodically, but it's also become a joke. Like if we get in a disagreement or misunderstanding, we'll say, but you don't have your shirt on. How am I supposed to know how to communicate with you?
I like that idea.
I think that is like so cute.
that was the smartest.
That's like a really good idea.
Yeah. I forget. I forget. I
and she just goes, being married to an industrial organizational psychologist.
I know, right? But yeah.
So what is the biggest mistake you see business owners make when it comes to like building that workplace culture?
So you said building. I'm glad you said building. At first I thought you were going to say when it comes to culture, this workplace culture, right? And so I'm going to answer that way first, and I'll get to your question. I think too often we see people trying to create a culture by focusing on symptoms of a culture, right? So they're like, culture is we want to take care of our people, give them ping pong ball tables, all of this different stuff that they see and they attribute to a fun, engaging, relaxed, high-performing, whatever they want to call it, culture, but they're focusing on the outcome, right? It's Well, an example of this, we saw it in Silicon. There's sort of been a change in Silicon Valley about this. But for a while, all the big tech companies were providing like 5-star meals 3 times a day, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They're cooking for their people, no cost. Even to the point, some companies were coming in while employees were at work, and they would pay for a service to refill all their cars with gasoline, right? I read a study about this. They were looking at this.
Sounds like a nice company.
It does. But now I'm going to challenge you on that. Step back. What is that really saying? They provide 3 meals a day. They take care of they start taking care of stuff that you would do off in your personal life. What is that saying?
I guess it can be taken as like they're like in a way like controlling them, or not really controlling, but kind of acting as like a mom, like, okay, you're going to do this, but I'll provide you with what you need.
Yeah, I feel like it really depends, because you could, on one hand, you could say that they care, but on the other hand, you could also say that they're possibly overcompensating.
Or like trying to buy the employees.
All of that ties in, because what they started realizing is that they're basically saying, we want all of your awake hours here. Right? People weren't spending time with their kids. They weren't going home to have dinners with their family. They weren't even doing something as simple as stopping and getting gas. Right? So now there's a trend to starting to be a pullback, at least out in big tech, where they're stopping serving breakfast and they're stopping serving dinner. They're like, go home and be with your families, right? Because that starts to create a different culture, or it exemplifies a different culture, right? It's like, you have no reason to leave. We have sleep pods. You guys can sleep here.
You got showers.
Yeah. I mean, I have friends out there and they're like, oh yeah, if you work less than 70, 80 hours a week, it's looked down upon because everything else is taken care of for you. Why would you need to leave? Right? So I see too often though, then everyone tries to, big tech, they get it, like they do the culture things. And I think what they forget to do is what you said about building it, Jasmine. They forget to step back and say, what is it that we want our culture to be? How do we want our employees to experience our company? How do we want people to talk about our company? And I think once they can actually define that, then what needs to happen or what happens too often. So the mistake, to your point, is they say, okay, so we want an engaged, happy, fun, cohesive culture. Great. We're going to serve all their meals, give them a ping pong ball table and sleep pods and blackout offices, right? Stuff like that. Then what you have to do is you have to step back and say, where are we now?
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of listening to your employees. How are you currently talking about us? Going on Glassdoor, going on social media, having conversations with your people, doing assessments, doing surveys, things like that. And then you can start to figure out, okay, here's where we want to be. Here's where we are now. What do we need to do to close those gaps and get there?
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you, I can't guarantee it. There's a really good chance that closing the gaps does not involve buying a ping pong ball table or buying lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, okay, we have to shift our mindset maybe. We need our managers to shift their mindset. We need our employees to shift their mindset. Once that mindset shift can happen, then there can be some skills that start to happen, some skill sets that need to be developed. And then the other stuff starts to come later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is that they focus on the symptoms versus the cause.
So it's almost like they try to buy company culture instead of build the company culture, almost.
Almost, but it's less about buying the culture. They're defining the company culture as outcomes of the culture.
Okay,
yeah. So really, the company culture, it's what it feels like when you come into work. It's even how you feel on your way to work. It's how you feel leaving work. That's culture, right? So that's what you focus on. Mm-hmm. And then the other stuff starts to come later.
So how would, I guess, a company go about really maintaining or building a good culture correctly for their company?
And I think it ties back into really understanding your people, right? Understanding where they are now, and making incremental changes. Right? You can't do that 180 and come in with the company. And we've seen it happen too many times. Like all of a sudden, we need a more cohesive office. So what do? They knock down all the walls and put everybody in a big open office space. And everyone's like, I talk to clients all day. I can't talk where there's 40 other people within 10 feet of me talking, right? So it's looking at the business strategy objectives. It's understanding where your people are. It's training managers on how to actually reinforce the type of culture that you want your people to have, making sure things like your benefits match up, right? Mm-hmm. It's interesting for a company, they'll say, we have a great benefits plan. Okay, so what do? Well, we match really high on 401k. We have good long-term disability, whatever it may be. And then you say, okay, but 90% of your workforce is under 30 years old. Is this stuff they're worried about, right? Maybe be looking at paternity leave. Maybe we should be looking at policies around allowing people to work from home so they can be more with their family. So I think it's really important to understand your people, and it's both who you currently have, but also who it is that you hope to attract, right? Mm-hmm. We get those questions more and more nowadays early on in the interview process. So tell me about your benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely did. And it really puts it in perspective, because I feel like it's like when you're building this thing, it's not necessarily like I feel like a lot of business owners want this kind of like one size fit all type thing. So like, tell me the system I'll pay for it, and then just install it for me, and then I don't have to worry about it. But it really puts it in perspective that it's more like an art, and it's really, getting to know people and understanding what they want and understanding what they need, instead of just saying, oh, well, I think this would be nice, and just giving it to them. It's almost like I know, like I'm easy to buy gifts for, because I like everything. But like the people who buy the best gifts sometimes for me are the people who are like, hey, do you need anything? And then I absolutely do. I could use this. Can you do that? And then they do it. And it's just, that's kind of what I think of when it comes to building that culture, instead of just guessing like, oh, I think this person will like that. It's more like, hey, how can I best serve you? How can I help you? Just feel better about this being a better workplace in general. and having that conversation. And I feel like a lot of companies haven't necessarily evolved to the point where they have that conversation. And I've worked at plenty of places where there was just something simple that I might have wanted. Just like literally one place I quit, I literally just wanted more hours. And literally, if they would have given me that, I probably would have still been there to this day because I had no other reason to leave. But it's just crazy how, those conversations aren't necessarily had in companies, and it could, really help not only the company, because I mean, it saves money. They have to train less and hire less. But also like, think of what that does to the customer. Like I just had a conversation with somebody. They were working at like this coffee shop, and they got to the point where the customers knew this person so well, they thought he owned the coffee shop. He didn't even own it. He just worked there. And all of a sudden, he didn't agree with, somebody who was promoted over him because he had worked there for a very long time, and they didn't even want to have a conversation about it. And he left. And the customers literally feel like the owner of it is now gone, which is, it's just crazy.
And it sounds like he was a super engaged employee, right? He felt ownership for the job, and that came through, right? And then that's tied back to that employee experience, directly correlating to your customer experience.
Yeah.
And this kind of gets back to the question about how you can help companies do this, though, too, because Joe, you did a good job on describing like a manager asking these questions, right? It takes, not everybody, but it's not necessarily natural, and it can take some training on how to get people to A, ask the right questions, B, to be open, and just to take in information and not try to solve the problem in the moment, right? So that's some training that a lot of companies can benefit from. Management, leadership training, or like executive coaching, right? Learning how to do empathetic listening, active listening, all of this. And then I think the other piece that too often gets overlooked is if and when the company may do things or may respond or add new things, it's really important to tie that back to feedback from employees, because now employees know that they're valued, that the company listens, and the company responds. Right? So in a prior life, I did a lot of employee engagement work at a prior company. And we were going through one of the surveys for this organization, and there were some comments about wanting some upgrades in the lunchroom, right, where they all hung out. So I'm talking to the leadership team, and they said, oh, well, we already have it's like a free vending machine coming in, and we have a water cooler being put in and a second refrigerator. And we said, okay, what a great opportunity to put a sign out there and say, we asked, you spoke, we listened.
Yeah.
Right. And they did that. And they sent out a message. And next year, the scores around the company caring for them went way up on their next survey because they just reinforced it. So tie it back.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. So you mentioned like the manager's training. So how does the company you're with, how do they like train the owners and managers, or like how do you guys help companies create like this great company culture?
Yeah. So before it gets to the point, I just talked about some of the training, right? So whether it's leadership, management, coaching, before it gets to that, there's a big value in having an objective outside third party come in and ask the tough questions, roll up our sleeves, or get our client leadership teams to roll up their sleeves and kind of unpack where they're currently at. It's the old analogy, like we're too close to it so we can't see our whole hand, right? So like the consultant outside party brings in that arm's view perspective and starts to, let's look at all these different variables that are going on here, right? So I like to think of a GPS analogy. So a GPS, the first thing you got to do is put in the destination. Where is it that you want to go? Right? So by having someone from the outside come in and help guide that conversation, that's so important. And then the next thing a GPS needs to know is what, right? It needs to know where we are now.
Yeah.
So, and that's that part of stepping back and really assessing the organization where we're at now. And then just helping them to close that gap. I shouldn't say that gap. There's usually a lot more than one gap, but it's starting to prioritize, right?
Yeah.
And if you do something like an organizational survey, we have a great partner, Engagement Multiplier. We use their platform. We can look what is driving all these different areas of a company's culture around employee engagement, view of leadership, customer experience, all of this stuff. So then we can start to prioritize what's going to have the biggest impact. Because I think too often it gets overwhelming for organizations. This happens quite often when they try to do it themselves internally, right? They decide we're going to change our culture, we're going to focus on employee engagement. Maybe they do a survey, monkey survey, whatever it may be, however they capture data. They get the data, but then it's overwhelming. So what happens? It goes in the bottom drawer of the desk.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the people are like, hey, you guys asked for input, we gave it to you, nothing's happened. So now you damage culture even more, right?
Yeah.
So we're able to come in, we're able to say, let's prioritize this. We think it's really important. Focus on one thing in 90 days. What are you going to focus on in 90 days? Then see how you did. Ask another couple questions, right? Did we hit the mark? Now, great, that's moving this way. And what's the next thing we're going to focus on? You start to do it that way, and then you start to see the whole culture, the whole employee experience and engagement start to change.
That's excellent.
It's important to break it down. So if you walk around my office, you would see a number of these in some different people's offices. Make it out, little elephant. It ties into breaking things down like that. So there's the old analogy that I've realized I got to ask it differently, but it goes, how do you eat an elephant? A lot of people are like, I won't eat an elephant, or the skin's too tough. So I should say, how would you eat an elephant-sized gummy bear? Maybe that, right?
Yeah.
It's bite by bite. You eat it bite by bite.
Yeah.
Same thing. You talk about wanting to change a culture, change anything, just focus on one thing, put everything towards that, and just incrementally. You do that, and bite by bite, next thing you know, the elephant-sized gummy bear is gone and your culture's changed.
Excellent. Definitely. So what is one takeaway that you want anyone to really gain from this podcast, whether they be an employee, manager, owner, whatever the case may be? What's that main takeaway that you would like somebody to kind of gain from this?
Man, only one? No. So if I reflect back in my mind in the last few minutes we've been talking, we're talking about a theme here, right? We're talking about, at the very beginning, finding something that you're passionate about, right? So that there's that alignment at the personal level between what we're doing and what we want to do and who we are, right? So it's that you're able to bring that your whole self to work. So that's almost where I would start at the individual level, right?
Yeah.
But at the organizational level too, it's understanding what it is, or getting clarity around where it is that you want to go and what your culture is that you want it to be, and understanding where you are, and knowing that while culture and strategy may be designed at the top, it's really driven and implemented from the bottom up. So your people need to be a part of it. Right? Bring them into the process, listen, get their recommendations. And like that example with the lunchroom, tie it back to them. Let them know that they are the reason you're doing what you're doing, and they ultimately will be the champions of your company.
Absolutely. I love it.
So you're on the Abundant Culture podcast. So it's only right that we ask you, how do you spread abundance?
How do you spread abundance? I think a lot of it has to do with our focus, right? So it's focusing on possibility. And when I say focusing on possibility, I don't mean ignoring the obstacles, right? The challenges. Ryan Holiday, you may follow his podcast or read some of his books.
I just read Ego is the Enemy, and it was awesome.
That is a great one. So the next one you got to read is The Obstacle is the Way.
Okay.
I just literally heard about that book.
I read both of those twice, and I'll probably read them a third time. They are both so good.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
My point in The Obstacle is the Way is it's not just look at possibilities, but it's also look at the obstacles and then see what possibilities there are. Right. And I think that is a way that we can really looking at abundance. It's not looking at limitations. It's looking, but it's not ignoring the limitations too. It's looking at the limitations and looking beyond. Right.
Absolutely.
I really think that that's so important. And at perspectives as it relates, I've got to tie it back to my job here though too. Right. I think it's looking at the long game. Right. So what I mean by that is when we work with clients, we look at what ultimately does the client organization need. Right? It's less about what we can deliver. what we can deliver would be like focusing on this quarter's P&L, looking at our income, right? We've got to push something out there. We really look at what do our clients need, what will help them out. Can we provide that, or do we go back to our networks and find other people that can help them? Because that's more that giving mentality. It's what do you need, not what can I offer. And I believe that is a true way to really create abundance, both within our own book of clients, but in society and our friends and in the world in general.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure somebody's going to be listening to this and they're going to want to reach out to you and maybe ask you more questions about culture and maybe how you can help their business, or maybe they're, they're just in some place in life where they need to lead people and they need help doing that. How can somebody actually get into contact with you?
So first, though, I want to say I love like brainstorming around these types of issues, right? So I tell people, like, there's no cost to give me a call. Let's unpack a problem.
Yeah.
But really, my job now running our organizational consulting division is to define a problem and then put together a team to go help solve it, right? So what I mean by that is, it's like a good analogy of this would be your child falls off their bicycle, right? Their knee. And what you want to do immediately is go in and, like, let me step back. What they want you to do is go and just put a Band-Aid on and make the pain stop, right? The reality is they need to learn how to ride a bike better.
Right.
For curves and stuff like this, right? My point in saying that is somebody will reach out and they'll say, Jonathan, our team isn't working well together. We need team building. Okay, but if we step back, why aren't they working well together? What is it that they're not doing that you want them to do, right? And then how do we address that? So my point being, I would love to have these conversations. If we can help you out with fixing it, great. If not, at least you have some more clarity, and then you can make a decision if you want to do something about it. So the best way to reach out to me would either be on LinkedIn. Super simple. You just go by my name, or because maybe it's because I was an early person on LinkedIn, I actually got leadership development is my URL on LinkedIn. Email is a good way. Maybe you guys can include this contact information
we do.
afterwards in the podcast. Email is jeisler@perspectivesltd.com. Or just give me a call. Seriously, I'll pick up the phone. If I can't answer, I'll call you right back. But it's 312-252-7744.
Awesome.
Thank you again so much. Like this podcast was awesome.
Yeah,
like this was a great conversation.
Yeah, this is fun. Your passion, your curiosity, your interest, all of this really comes through in what you guys do. And it's been fun being a part of it.
Thank you. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Get well soon.
All right. Enjoy the rest of the day and keep spreading abundance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will do.
All right, guys.
So that's all we have for today, folks. I hope you got as much value out of this as we did. Keep in mind, the only way we can improve is through constructive feedback. So remember to rate and review this episode. Also, you are not the only person that needs to know this super valuable information. So be sure to subscribe and share as well. Stay tuned for the next episode. And remember to always spread abundance. Peace.